Hello, youthful family. Gary here, back with another weekly story, thought, whatever you want to call it. Today we're going to be talking about friends. So, we've got our notes, got our Bible, got the hat. Let's roll the intro and go. All right, so we're going to be talking about friends. So I'm calling this one Learning to Turn On, right? Learning to turn on. That's an interesting statement for me because we live in a world where we have devices everywhere that we turn on and off all the time. We've got phones, TVs, computers. Everything has an on and off switch. But what we need to remember a lot of times is that our relationships with people, our friendships, how we interact have on and off switches too. Because when we are present with somebody and not on our phone, but actually interacting with them, having a conversation, we're turned on to them versus how easily we can turn off to things, right? So the kind of thought for today, the thing that's been bouncing around in my mind is that this question of, have you ever had a friendship or have you ever had a relationship with somebody that just stopped, right? Have you ever been at that point in time where you found yourself wondering what happened to so-and-so? I used to talk to them all the time. I never talk to them anymore. What happened? And as I thought about that question, I began to think more about what makes relationships move forward. How do we move relationships forward? How do we move friendships forward? And the answer, right, is by being present with them, by focusing our attention on them, right? None of this is groundbreaking or new or something that's never been said before. But here's the thing. We so often in today's fast-paced digital age where everything is vying for our attention, and we get told that what we do online and digitally, and that everything matters and that everything's important and that everything needs you now. We sometimes forget that when you are physically with people, where our priority should be, where our focus should be. And so, as the mind keeps going, it then takes the next step of asking, well, have you ever had that friend, right, that, never stops talking, right? Because that's how sometimes relationships go downhill as well, is when there's an imbalance in the friendship where one person is giving the whole time, and then one person is taking the whole time. And there's this imbalance, and pretty soon the relationship deteriorates. So, with that being said, our relationship with people is important, but can we apply this to our relationship to God? So, the question comes down to, do you view God as a friend or as an entity that, you sometimes pray to? Do you view God as somebody that has a relationship in your life, or do you view God as just this omnipresent being that's impersonal and impassionate and doesn't have a direct connection to you, right? So what I want to propose to you, right, is that if you're feeling stagnant in your relationship with God, if you're looking for movement, if you're looking for action, if you're looking for miracles in your relationship with Jesus that you're not seeing, right? If you're feeling like you haven't moved forward in a while, if you're feeling like your time is more important outside of God versus with God, here's my question, here's my, what I'm submitting to you, is that God should be just like any other friendship you have. God should be just like any other best friend you have. God should be the relationship that you care about. But for that to happen, right, it can't just be us talking at God nonstop. It can't just be us praying only. And it's not about action. That's not what I'm getting to. What I'm getting to is when you have that friend that never stops talking, when you have that friend that always demands attention, when you have that friend that doesn't listen to you, your relationship tends to deteriorate. So when you put the same perspective on our relationship with God, how often are we just talking and never listening? How often are we the ones that are always saying, God, gimme, 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 without actually listening to what he says in return, right? So there are a bunch of verses on prayer, and there are a bunch of verses on friendship. And the two that I like a lot, John 15:15, and I'm not going to read it word for word. I'm just going to give you the Cliff Notes version, which basically, if you read the whole passage around it for context, so you get the tone, you get the voice, and understand where it's at. But if you read the entire thing, John 15:15 is where it says that, we're not kept in the dark, but that God shares everything with us because we're his friends. Right? And so that's kind of what prompted me to start thinking about all this is if we're friends of God, do we act like we're friends? Or do we act in a way that's other than how you would treat your friend? So what you should think about, what I'm thinking about, is that our relationship to God has an on-off switch as well. Right? How we interact with God, how we interact with Jesus inside us has an on-off switch that we can choose to turn on and off when it's convenient, right? We can pray and then switch off immediately and move on to the next thing. Or you can keep the switch on where you not only turn on, but you tune in. Right? Because there's a big difference between background noise, which is what a lot of us will do, is put something on in the background. We'll, talk to Google Home, we'll talk to Alexa, we'll, do whatever, and just say, hey, play some music. Because you want to have something playing in the background. You want that noise there. And so the difference is the noise in the background is just filler versus when you're directly listening to something. So when you're having a relationship with somebody, if they're just filler in the background, the relationship is going to deteriorate. So if God is just filler in the background of your life, the relationship with God is going to stagnate and deteriorate. So the flip side of that is, how do you make a relationship move forward? How do you invest your time, your energy, your focus into a relationship? And it's really simple. By turning on and tuning in. Because when we focus on something, that's where we're showing priority. Where we spend our time is where our priority is. Where we spend our time is what we're putting value on. So if you spend time on your relationships with people, you're putting value on those people, and the relationships will grow. And likewise, if you spend time on your relationship with God, that relationship is going to grow. So how can we spend time with God? We can spend time with God in a few different ways, right? I think of it back to, when you have a friend, how do you get to know somebody better? How do you get to know your friends better? How do you build the friendship? And it comes down a lot to asking questions and listening to answers. Asking questions and listening to the answer. So how can you ask questions? You can pray, right, to God, of course. You can talk to other, people in the church body, right? Getting into God's word is a great way of not only asking questions, because you're going to look in the Bible for specific things, but it's also a great way of hearing, a response, because of, finding the passage that speaks directly to you at that moment, and God will use passages for you in different ways at different times of your life. But it's also about having quiet time where you just are listening to what God has to say to you. Because there's a difference between actively listening to somebody and just having background noise. So when you go about your day, be conscious about where you're putting your focus, where you're tuning in to. If you're tuning in more to your phone than your friends, you may want to look at readjusting. If you're tuning in more to, the day-to-day random meaninglessness, like what people are commenting on your social media, how many likes you're getting on a photo from people that you don't know, that you've never met before, versus time you're spending with people that are actually in your life interacting with you. Maybe think about where you're investing your time. Maybe think about where you're putting your value. And part of the challenge that, I have for you is put that value on God. So think about, what quality of a relationship do you want with God? Do you want to be acquaintances? Do you want to be, the casual passerby? Do you want to be friends? Do you want to be best friends? Do you want to have that close, intimate relationship? And if you do, go after it the same way you'd go after a relationship with one of your friends. Because that's what God is. God isn't just this omnipresent, omniscient being that's impersonal. God is personal to each person. God is personal to you. God has value on you. And if we put the same value on our relationship with God that we do with our relationship with our phones, you're going to see a world of difference in your life. So that's the thought for today, is where are you investing your time? What are you turning on and tuning into? And what do you want? If you want that relationship with God to be close and personal where you're hearing from God, make sure that you're actually tuning in to what God is saying, and that means listening to what God is saying to you, being open to hearing what God is saying to you, and actually trying to have a relationship rather than just throwing things at a wall hoping for a response. So with that, thank you guys, as always, for listening. We will be talking to you again next week. So if you want to see more, hit subscribe, like, or comment, and we will catch you in the next one.